We have the pleasure of hearing from our board chairman this morning, who graciously consented to serve as our keynote speaker. Dr. Tod A. Burnett, president of Saddleback College, received his BA in Political Science and Administrative Studies at UC Riverside, received an MBA from USC, a doctorate in Education and Organizational Leadership from Pepperdine, and also received a certificate in Senior Executive State and Local Government from the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard. Since 2008, Dr. Burnett has served as the president of Saddleback College, and prior to that, he was the vice chancellor in the state chancellor's office and coordinated the first system-wide strategic plan and led the first system-wide emergency planning and preparedness effort and system-wide communications. In 2003, he was the Deputy of Appointments Secretary for the Governor of California, recommending appointments of over 300 full and part-time positions in the state government. Prior to that, he served the President of the United States as Director of State and Local Government Relations for the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. In 1996, he served as a commissioner in the City of Los Angeles Board of Public Works. Besides chairing the 3C2A board, Dr. Burnett also serves on the South Orange County Chamber of Commerce, the Saddleback College Foundation, the Southern California Army Advisory Council, Orange County Business Council and Educational Committee, and there are several others. He is the distinguished alumnus from Pepperdine, received an Alumni Public Service Award from UC Riverside, and was recognized by the Saddleback Student Government as for Leadership Mentor Award and the Betty Scherer, hope I pronounced that correct, Spirit Award. He's been recognized by the California Student Veterans for his outstanding leadership and continued support of veteran student success. Dr. Burnett is also an honorary member of the Phi Theta Kappa and holds membership in several professional organizations. That's just a brief snippet of his bio. We are, I think, extremely pleased to ask Dr. Burnett to deliver our keynote address for this convention. Dr. Burnett.
Well, thank you, Carlisle. It's always nice when somebody introduces me and gets the latest bio on the website. Thank you very much. It also reminds me that I need to update it as well. But with that, I'll tell you, I'm very excited to be here today, and I'm more thrilled that you're all here today. What I'm excited about is, as you can see, the title of my presentation today is really, it's a bright future for our Community College Athletic Association, and more importantly, an exciting time for our community college athletics, our students, and what I believe, and I think I speak on behalf of most of us, of where we can go and where we are going to be going. First, I would like to recognize, I see some of my fellow board members in here, and I apologize if I missed anybody, but I know I have Dr. Pam Lester here. I have Dr. Pam Walker. Anybody else? Carlisle Carter? Anybody else here? I can't see. Newton Shillette. Where's Newton? Right in front of me. Newton Shillette. Anybody else? Well, thank you, fellow board members, as well. And, I forgot. Rod Bilby. Sorry, thank you for Dr. Bilby coming down. So what I'm going to do today, as I mentioned, is I wanted to talk a little bit about some personal thoughts that I have, but also wanted to represent the board of directors and give you some insights and things and some exciting things that are happening right now and will be happening in the future. First off, I really need to thank all of you. As I opened up earlier, I'm excited for you to be here. We're excited to see you be here. We cannot lose sight that every day, and I know you don't, but I want to make sure you understand that we don't lose sight that every day we know the great work that you do each and every day on behalf of our students, on behalf of our athletics programs, and on behalf of the work and mission of our community colleges. So just wanted to thank everybody that's involved in our college athletics, which are students and coaches and faculty and staff and game officials, of course, which we always seem to forget about, athletic directors and commissioners, the 3C2A staff, and all CEOs, administrators, and managers, community fans, everybody that's involved. And if you think about the numbers of people, and I want you to remember this because I'm going to mention this again later on, the numbers of people that are involved in our California community colleges are immense. It's enormous. In fact, I really can't think of, from a numbers perspective, anything within our community colleges that has more people involved in directly than probably community college athletics. So just want to thank you for the great work you do. So one thing I thought I'd do rather than just come up here and continually talk about stuff is to throw out some stuff. I was thinking about, happened to come by one of my favorite quotes, which is actually included in my presentation, but I said, you know what, I started looking at some other quotes. So I wanted to throw out some, take this opportunity to mention some distinguished quotes about athletes and about athletics, and from athletes and some non-athletes about athletics. So my first quote is actually from a non-athlete, I think. I don't know. I never read his athletic background. I was certainly not there, but I hear he's a pretty smart guy. His name's Plato, and he said, you can discover more about a person in an hour of play than a year of conversation. Ray Lewis, as you all might know, a prominent NFL linebacker, played for the Baltimore Ravens and University of Miami. He said, don't walk through life just playing football. Don't walk through life just being an athlete. Athletics will fade. Character and integrity and really making an impact on someone's life, that's the ultimate vision, that's the ultimate goal, bottom line. Nancy Lopez, as you know, one of the most famous golfing greats, said, do your best, one shot at a time, and then move on. Jesse Owens, absolutely legendary Olympic gold medalist and track star. To me, we must learn to spell the word respect. We must respect the rights and properties of our fellow man and woman, and then learn to play the game of life, as well as the game of athletics, according to the rules of society. If you can take that and put it into practice in the community in which you live, then to me, you have won the greatest championship. Will Rogers, once again, I'm not sure if he was an athlete or not, but he said, when should a college athlete turn pro? Not until he or she has earned all she can as a college, as an amateur. Alan Wamesley, you probably never heard of. He's actually an English fell runner. And if you don't know what fell running is, I actually had to look it up myself. That's actually off-road, cross-country running off on mountains and paths, kind of like a mountain bike, but a runner. He said, show me a man and a woman who never failed, and I'll show you a man or woman who never tried anything hard enough. Mary Lou Retton, of course, Olympic gymnast that we all watched. A trophy carries dust, but memories last forever. So the first thing I want to talk about is give you a little the picture of the 100,000-foot level. And of course, you've heard it all at your colleges. You've heard it before. So I'll go through pretty quickly, but I just want to go over it. You know, I believe, and I think many of us would see, that we're really going through an educational renaissance right now in the nation, in the state, and at our local levels. First, we all know about the student success agenda. Really, it's the completion agenda. Everybody from the President of the United States to the current governor, the former governor, the state legislature, every business organization, every educational think tank, everybody is saying, we need to be competitive in the United States. For our workforce to be competitive, we need to have more trained citizens. We need to have more degrees, certificates, and for us, that obviously means transfers. To help to increase and train our workforce for the future. So it's all about completions. You all know about it. We'll keep talking about it, and you'll hear more. The second one, which really is directly related to it and is increasingly becoming a real topic, is economic and workforce development, which once again, what economic and workforce development it is and what our mission is at community colleges is to train the workforce to help spur our local, our state, and our national economy. Well, it's a huge implications. The next is, which once again related to the first two, is there's an increasing collaborations and formal pathways, what we call K through, at least at my college I dub it K through career. And what that is that we can't just no longer be in silos at the elementary, the middle school, the high school, the community colleges, the 4 years, the grad schools, the tech schools. No, we need to all be working together on a collaborative and almost a synchronous manner, so we can be much more effective in how we once again increase those completions, how we once again provide better economic and workforce development for our society. Equity. I'll tell you, I just attended the state's first equity conference a couple weeks ago up in the Bay Area. It was fantastic. I also am going to talk a little bit more about this. But equity, in particular, the achievement gap, and in particular is men of color, which once again, I'm going to come back to that in a little bit. And then finally, accountability. What's happening, all these things, what's happening through everything we do is in education, certainly at the community colleges is, we're being asked to be more accountable. Now, what that means accountable is a different story, but it is saying that we need to basically show the resources and efforts that we're putting into this, what the outcomes are, and are they being effective or not. And then, of course, there are some areas they want us to be more effective, which, of course, are the things I just mentioned. Well, in addition, in the education renaissance, there's a lot of things changing in the environment out there, of things that we can't control to some degree. First, of course, is demographics. We know in California what the demographic changes are, but then there are some that we don't really talk about much. Of course, we have the changing demographics regarding racial changes. The gender changes. I mentioned men of color earlier. We're all saying that more women are now going to college than men, and more women are more successful than men overall. So that's a different demographic changes. We know that our high schools, especially in many areas, are actually starting, the classes are decreasing, their graduating classes, even though some areas they're actually increasing. But that disparity is happening throughout the state we need to be aware of. Another thing is retirements, as we know very well in athletics, as well as all positions in colleges and academia, is that we have a pending, looming retirements of many, many people at all levels, particularly at the faculty and the upper administrative levels. And that's something we need to be concerned about. Funding resources, don't have to say enough. We all know all the challenges in the environment on funding. What's really happening is, you know, the old days of relying upon state funding and relying upon they're going to give us COLA or they're going to give us more money, they're going to give us growth. You know what? It never really was that relevant except for the days when there was massive growth. But certainly nowadays, we got to start thinking differently and understand that what we have is what we have. And how are we going to deal with what we have in going forward? But more importantly, how can we start bringing in more resources externally and more innovatively to achieve our mission? Education cost. You're hearing all over the place, especially at a national level, state levels, about the rising cost of education. Yes, and California community colleges are the lowest cost institution in the nation, actually. But there's a lot of aspects that you don't know about. In fact, my college, just literally on Monday night at the board meeting, for the first time maybe in its history, we actually had a formal presentation to our board on financial aid. And I don't know how many of your boards have ever had formal presentations to your board and to your college or community on what is financial aid, how do you do it, what are the challenges, how many students do you have, what's the makeup, et cetera. But what's really eye-opening about financial aid in California, I want to remind everybody, which has a direct relation to our student population, is that financial aid does not cover all the cost. One of the differences between California community colleges and the 4 years, for instance, the 4 years you can get a full ride. We're talking everything, including your living cost and over and above, you can get funded for, whether through financial aid and scholarships and other institutional support. But at community colleges, the maximum amount you can get without getting a loan, we're about $17,500 a year at cost, including living expenses, roughly. And as we all know, that's probably on the low side. But the financial aid doesn't cover for about $5,500 to $6,000. That's a full ride. You still have a $6,000 of unmet need. Then, of course, you can go to the loans, but even the loans, subsidized loans, are only about I think it's $5,000 or $5,500. Still doesn't cover all of the amounts. Then you have to go to the private loans. And that's if you want to, once again, take loans out. But we, in the community colleges, is different than the 4 years is. Do we provide scholarships for athletics? No. Do we provide other type of supports to our athletes? No. And we're not able to. Why? I don't know. That's something I'd certainly like to see us revisit in the future, but I don't know why our athletes are any different than athletes that go to the 4 years, and I think that's something we need to talk about. But we need to understand that the education costs are rising, and those pressures will still be there. Competition. There's competition in our community colleges. In fact, it kind of ties to the other ones as well, but the competition for our students at the lower end are happening. It's interesting. The CSU wants to do more lower division stuff. The community colleges are thinking about doing baccalaureate degrees. The privates and independents are out there going at all angles against us, et cetera. But that competition is not going to lessen. The other thing we need to think about in competition is competition amongst ourselves. The last thing that it bothers me more than anything is when community colleges think we're competitive amongst each other. I'm not talking about athletic competition, I'm talking about as institutions. But that's something that has to change. You saw my first opening, or my other comments, about what's happening on the completion agenda, collaborations and pathways and economic and workforce development. That's not done in a silo. We have to start partnering more with each other, which also helps from a competitive standpoint. Data and metrics, once again about accountability. Everything's about data and metrics right now, folks, and you're going to hear more about it in this presentation, but we are increasingly being asked to prove and show and look at that data to understand our student populations, to understand all that we do in a much better fashion, and we will hear more about that. Then finally, the environmental changes, once again, is accountability. And as the whole environment, wherever at all levels, is looking for us to be much more accountable. So let's look a little bit. I just mentioned some things about athletics, speaking of education renaissance. So what are the things that are kind of happening with athletics right now, college athletics? Well, first and foremost is we're undervalued, folks. I've been saying it since I've been on the board, as you've heard. In fact, some of the goals in the board about how do we market and present, how do we get the data out there. We've talked many times about that we're a model for student success, and we should be seen as such, and we should be supported as such in the future. But athletics is still, and community colleges in California are undervalued of really where they should be at, and we'll talk more about that. The NCAA, as you know, there are all kinds of changes happening at the NCAA from all over, so all the angles. It doesn't seem like there's a week goes by that there's not something new or something, that pressure that's going down about the 4 years. Just read an article, it was the last article this week, about the NCAAs, which no surprise to us, the have-not conferences in colleges versus the not, and they're looking at that. So they're having a lot of issues that are going on. And of course, look at the issues that the NCAA are doing regarding eligibility for our students, for transfer students that go to the four-year institutions and their eligibility. One you've been hearing a lot about, of course, is unionizing. The old Northwestern. You know, students are going to unionize. They're going to unionize and get benefits and all these things. But you know what? We all kind of laugh and we scoff and look at it. It's kind of almost pathetic if you think about it, that these students felt that they had to go to this degree to do some basic things that we're not providing our student athletes. But keep in mind, we have student athletes too. Some of those issues that they're talking about at Northwestern, we're talking Northwestern, one of the elite institutions that has more money than all of our community colleges in California combined at that institution. And those are those students talking about the problems that they're not getting the support that they need to succeed, or what they think is fair. Imagine our student population. So we need to keep an eye on those issues. Financial aid, as I mentioned before, I just went over the financial aid example before about not only for students as a whole, but for our athletes. I have a story that we tell on our campus, and a couple years ago, our student health center had a student come in, and this student was undernourished, basically had fainted in class. They found out he was undernourished, et cetera, et cetera. Come to find out, he was living in a tent in a local park with his father, that they moved here so he could play football at California, at our college. I just don't think that's right, that any student, let alone our athletes, should have to be living in tents. I'll tell you, I give that family and his father a lot of kudos to go where he really thinks that that student can succeed. But to have our students that are, frankly, almost starving, there's something wrong with that, and there's something that we need to think of in association. Because right now, my understanding of the rules are if we provided food or scholarship to that student, we're in violation of the rules that we have for our association, our athletics. But these are the type of things we need to be thinking more about, folks, because it's about the students and it's about success, and we got to find ways to start helping these people. I mentioned earlier about men of color. At the conference on equity, they gave out a brochure here, and I know my colleagues probably know about this, CEO colleagues. The title of this article, or this report, is called Examining the Status of Men of Color in California Community Colleges, Recommendations for State Policymakers by Frank Harris III and J. Luke Wood. Their first recommendation in this report is require student outcomes data on the Community College Student Success Scorecard to be disaggregated by gender within race and ethnicity. And that's a noble, not surprising goal. But interesting enough, for the first time that I've seen, in that recommendation, at the end, it says, outcome data for students who participate in athletics should be reported on the scorecard homepage as well. especially given the number of men of color who enroll in community college to participate in sports and transfer to a four-year institution, and the disparity that exists in transfer outcomes between men of color and their white male peers who participate in community college athletics. As I said, we talked about this years ago, we started with our data. We started our first discussions about data, and we're going to talk much more about it. They are now asking us and using athletics for a very important initiative as one of the areas specifically to deal with the men of color issue. And actually, after that, I went through and looked at some of the data statewide, looked at my own institution, was looking around, and it's true. When you look in there, it's interesting. Even within the cohort of athletics, the men, there's still the disparity between underrepresented groups, in particular African American and Latino males, between their white and Asian American counterparts. Same as the disparity in the overall student population. So what is happening there? There's something happening demographically. If it's happening in athletics, it's happening in the overall student population. What's going on there? So it's great that the state is now looking into that, but that also is going to be a responsibility for us once again. Transparency. The environment is everything's much more transparent because of technology, because of requirements, because just the way our society is, everything's more transparable. And then finally, of course, for athletics, we need to be more, and we're going to be held more accountable. Notice that the three themes for all three of them were accountability. So, is the California Community Colleges ready, or are we going through our own athletics renaissance? Mike Ditka, as we all know, famous Chicago Bears coach, said, "Success isn't permanent and failure isn't fatal." When I was thinking about the California Community Colleges, I was thinking about Athletic Association, I immediately started going back to basics. And it's funny, you know, sometimes you do that in school, you do it in your jobs, you go, gosh, I haven't read that book in a long time, or wow. I said, let's go back to basics. So I said, I'm going to go back and read the mission, vision, and values of our association. So the values, which I have to say I think are excellent, say the 3C2A believes in student health and welfare, academic and athletic success, ethical conduct, accountability, recognition of academic and athletic excellence, and an inclusive culture that fosters equitable participation. Whoever wrote that and participated, I think that was well done. However, if you read our vision and mission, the vision of the 3C2A is that we shall be a student-centered organization focused on academic and athletic excellence. Now, a vision statement is what we aspire to be. It's where we want to go. I was a little bit disturbed to some degree, to be honest, when I read that we're going to be student-centered as what we aspire to be. No, I think that's what we are, and I believe we are. So one thing I would recommend is that we might want to collapse the vision statement with our mission statement, because I think that's much more of our mission than necessarily our vision. With that, our current mission statement says, the mission of 3C2A is to advocate for the overall well-being of student athletes through the governance, promotion, and support of intercollegiate athletics. What a great way to merge those two into a nice mission. You know, let's take that certain mission and talk about student-centered would be great. So if we don't have a real vision, or a vision at least I would propose, I don't think is very inspirational or visionary or thinking of where we're going to go, what would that be? So I did my own little drafting, my little wordsmithing without a group, so it was kind of fun. It was just me. You know, I debated with myself. Anyway, I came up with pretty simple. I'm a pretty simple guy when it comes to drafting mission statements and vision statements, and I just threw this out there for everybody to think about. So I said, what about the California Community College Athletics will lead the nation in student academic and athletic success? We can and we should lead the nation, folks, in athletic and academic success for our students, and we can do that. Vince Lombardi, as you all know, is the legendary coach of the Green Bay Packers and Super Bowl champion. He said, perfection is not attainable, but if we chase perfection, we can catch excellence. So when we talk about us being a national leader, our vision of leading the nation in academic and athletic excellence, I mentioned earlier that I thought our value statement was really good. Well, if we want to be the leader, just go back to our values, actually. And if we start excelling in each one of those, we will be the national leader. First is, as we said before, health and welfare of our students. Academic and athletic success, of course. Ethical conduct. Accountability, again, the A word. Academic and athletic excellence. And inclusive culture, equitable participation. Folks, we do all those things. We excel at all those. We will be the national leader. Yogi Berra, famous New York Yankee, for all you baseball fans, player, coach, and manager, he said, if the world was perfect, it wouldn't be. Actually, that was my favorite quote, by the way, I mentioned earlier, of all time. Newt Rockne said, and if you don't know who he is, he's one of the greatest football coaches of all time at Notre Dame, and that's a lot for me to say, as I'm a very loyal USC Trojan. But he said, make the present good, and the past will take care of itself. Well, folks, our 3C2A, our community colleges, all of us individually and collectively, we certainly aren't perfect at all, and we should never make too much excuses for that. But we can obviously be a lot better. Over the last, I'd say the last year, maybe it's been brewing even longer, we've been hearing a lot of rumbling, a lot of complaints about everybody, whether it's the rules, the CEO, we have colleges filing lawsuits, we have everybody complaining, whining about stuff, and it's typical in our atmosphere in academia for that to happen. But it kind of seemed, from my perspective and many of my fellow board members, to kind of getting out of hand. It seemed like it was getting a little bit further in a lot of ways. So I thought of an idea, and for our last board meeting, we added onto that board meeting and said we're going to do a retreat. We're going to do a leadership retreat, and we wanted to bring in kind of the leadership of the 3C2A to get together and to identify, discuss, and develop a course of action to resolve some of these possible flaws, the possible problems potentially in our 3C2A processes, our procedures, and our protocols. So we did this leadership retreat on February 14th. Actually, I hosted it at my college. The participants, once again, were the entire board of directors, all commissioners, the Athletic Directors Association Executive Board, and our Chief Executive Officer here. And we had about, I think it was at least 90% attendance. It was very well attended, almost 100%, believe it or not. So I wanted to tell you all, for the first time now through our association, to everyone else, what happened at that leadership retreat, which was extremely positive, and where we're going to go forward with what we learned and what we discussed at that leadership retreat. Well, what came about at that leadership retreat, the first thing that we did is I had sent out to everyone out there, and it was confidential, allowed all the members that were going to be attending that leadership retreat, who I just mentioned, an opportunity to bring forth their ideas, their comments, their issues, their questions, anything at all that they wanted to bring forth. And so received, believe it or not, about 100 different comments from all those folks. Some more wordy than others, but we did nonetheless receive about that. And when we looked at about the 100, we noticed that they all fell into about 4 common themes in 4 areas. And the first theme that arose was under governance issues. And those governance issues, a lot of them had to do with, and maybe surprisingly, what's the role of the board? What's the role of the CEO? What's the role of the commissioners? What's the role of athletic directors? What's the role of coaches? What's the role of all of us and each of us? And then how do we basically operate within the 3C2A effectively? The second issue was accountability, which actually was the biggest issue. And what it came down to, accountability is, who's responsible for what? Why are they not doing it? How can they do it better? Should they be doing it? Are we missing somebody to do it? And how do we hold them accountable to it? If you're not doing it, what's the repercussions? But on the other side, how can we help everybody to do a better job with what they're required to do? So accountability is one of the biggest issues. The third one was legislation, rules, penalties, and sanctions. So kind of throwing that all into one lump. And that had to do with kind of our Constitution, how we operate, how we want to go forward on our rules and our conferences and our play, all that kind of stuff. And that's pretty straightforward. And then finally, of course, no surprise, student success. Since that's an area that is, as I said, on a national, state, local level, it is important for our institutions, and it's such a big issue. That would be the fourth theme. So out of that, we had a full day of discussion on each of those 4 areas. Everything from breakout groups to the whole group came back and discussed. Once again, we started out with those 100 comments that came forward and really went through each of those. And so I'm going to go over each of those 4 theme areas. And we came up with, in the end, was what are the top 1 to 4 priority areas that we as a 3CA should work out, ranking the top 4 areas. So first, let me talk about governance. Under governance, our first priority that was identified was they need to get presidents and CEOs at our institutions much more involved. We need the institutions to know more about student athletics and to support it more, to be more involved statewide, and to understand our challenges and the opportunities, and of course, that we are a model for success. At that, we also since then have identified how we're going to go forward with each of these priorities and who's going to be responsible. And under that one, I believe that one is, which we're going to talk about at the board meeting on Thursday, Thursday and Wednesday actually, I'm sorry, Thursday and Friday, is we're going to have the board and the CEO. We're going to work on seeing how we can do that a lot better, even though, of course, we welcome everybody's input. The second priority was role clarification. This is probably the single first biggest one. I opened earlier about governance, and that is, once again, what is the true role that each of us have? How do we all fit together? Who's responsible for what? Who should be doing what? And how do we all work together more effectively? And it was amazing how so many issues came forward, and that was the stumbling block. You know, what is the full role of an athletic director, commissioner, the CEO, the board, all of us? So we are going to get on that right away. In fact, I've already asked, we're going to talk about it at the board to get it approved on Friday, but we would like to put together a task force, and Linda Lacey, our vice chair of the board, has agreed to serve as the chair, and then of course putting together a task force that's going to come together with all of our representative groups to really start going through and clarifying fully the roles and what that means. The third priority under governance was athletic directors and the management council have the power to address issues of the organization. That's a more deeper issue than what that statement says, but what we realized is we first need to clarify the roles before we can tackle that issue. So that one's on hold until we clarify the roles and then move forward. In addition, for each of these theme areas at the retreat, we came up with what we call quick fixes. Of the myriad of issues that came forward, there were a lot of things we thought that we could do pretty quickly and pretty easily. So under governance, there were a lot, actually. And the first quick fix that we said we'd do is that athletic directors need to be more engaged in the ADA Association. Well, the ADA Executive Board, of course, is going to take that on with our support as well. Conferences need to do a better job of preparing member colleges. That's kind of a big issue, too, but the commissioners, in particular, said they would be the ones that would be best probably to take that issue on for starters. The third one is the board should be in tune with the efforts that it will require from the field, the workload and financial costs. Well, of course, the board and CEO need to work on that, and once again, we also need all of you to give input on that one. We need to review the diversity of our governance groups. And what's good about that is we have a diversity and inclusive committee, which is, I believe, a subcommittee of the Management Council, and I think Rory Natividad. Is Rory here? Oh, way in the back. Rory, I think you're heading that up, correct? The Management Council is going to look into the diversity of our governance groups. And once again, that's more about how we can help do better to bring in more diversity in our in all ranks. The next one is including the board in discussion groups, basically getting the board more involved in the Management Council, the retreats, conference meetings, legislation discussions, et cetera. And once again, the board and the CEO will talk more about that. The next is board meetings centered in conferences, not at the end. This is an issue that you'll see coming up on the other themes as well. I will tell you, we've already been working with the CEO and the board for discussions, and that's already taking action. Starting next fall, both our conferences will be revised to take into account all of the input we've had. And one of them is, the motivation is to get the board much more involved, getting you much more involved with the board as well in our conferences, among other things that we can do during those conferences, and balancing out the fall and spring. Anyway, we've got lots of good ideas that we're working on, but that is already in the works. That will start in the fall. Finally, we need to include board agenda items that are well-defined. Once again, that's the board and CEO, just to make sure that can happen, and we think that's a quick fix. Well, the next theme is accountability, the A word again, accountability, which really we had the most comments on from all levels on this particular issue. The top 4 priorities, the first one is training. We need to, of course, as I mentioned, it's not just about the stick, it's about the carrot. And part of the carrot is that we need to make sure that our folks have the proper support and training and support to be effective in the jobs that they do. So one of the things that we propose, we'll be talking with the board about, is proposing to create actually a standing board committee on training and development, since it's that important. Also, I mentioned Rory Natividad back there. Rory's also, for the AD Executive Board, is already working on this, and he's creating a leadership training institute already with the ADA Board and athletic directors for athletic directors. So already folks are off and running on some elements of providing training and development. Number 2 priority was enforcement. Once again, I think we need to, and we agreed that we need to get clarification, role clarification, before we can move to the next level on the enforcement area, because a lot of enforcement is who does it, who's supposed to do it, how is it done? You know, those kind of questions. Well, let's get the roles clarified first. Number 3, under accountability, same as under governance, they have role clarification again. So once again, this goes back to the task force that Linda Lacey is going to be leading. And number 4 is clear expectations. What are the clear expectations? Well, once again, that goes back to the role clarifications and the accountability elements. So again, we need to get the role clarification issues under the task force to work on those before we can tackle that. Under the quick fixes, we had one, and once again, I mentioned to it earlier, it's conference meeting conflicts, scheduling, conference alignment. Again, we're going to be looking at revamping and looking at how we can improve upon both the fall and spring conference and be working with the CEO and staff on that. The next theme area is legislation, rules, penalties, and sanctions. The top 3 priorities were first, the legislative process. We already have a good group in place. We have our board's Constitution Committee that we think are the ones that should tackle that issue. It's currently led by Dr. Rosa Carlson, but Rosa is going to be exiting off the board soon, so we'll probably have a new chair there that will lead the Constitution Committee on this particular effort. The second is infractions database, which was the second priority. That's something that the CEO and the office, CCCAA 3C2A office can be working on with the board. Number 3, recruiting issues and enforcement. Once again, this is another issue about accountability, roles, so once again, let's wait for the work of the role clarification task force. The quick fixes. 3C2A needs a researcher. We put that as a quick fix, even though maybe it's not so quick. When we say quick, it's because we know how to get it done. It's just how do we pay for it, of course, is the big issue. So we're going to work with the CEO. But then again, we may need your help on that too. Spending more money means we got to raise more money. How do we raise money? Unfortunately, we raise money right now through dues. But I'm hoping that we can find some other ways to raise resources to help us on things like this. Or maybe we can find another way. I was just thinking about it. The state chancellor's office, for instance, brings in, for career development aspects, brings in people from various colleges that come in and do projects and serve for a year or 2 sometimes doing certain things. Maybe we do the same thing with 3C2A. Maybe a college would be willing to loan out one of their researchers for a job, an assignment for 6 months or for a year. Just something to think about. The second quick fix was legislative analysis, having to do with the pro-con neutral. Once again, the Constitution Committee, this is an issue probably many of you have heard about, but the Constitution Committee is certainly would be the perfect place to work on that. The fourth and last area was student success, and they had 5 actually priorities. First is to develop a student success model. We've talked about that athletics is a model program for student success. It is, but we need to be more better about that, and more better about that. We need to do a better job. We need to do a better job of how, yes, yeah, thank you. More better, yeah. So doing that, once again, the CEO and the board are going to take on it. Actually, this is a good issue for our Academic and Athletic Standards Review Committee. Currently, right now, Dr. Pam Walker leads it, but she's going to be going off, and so we need to find someone to replace her. I don't know how we could ever replace you, Pam, but we will. Did you say you would, Pam? The other Pam? Oh, I thought you just said something. Okay. Your awards. The second issue is creating a metrics and data. We talked about that earlier. Once again, that's the CEO and board, and we've already working on it. We have our own athletic scorecard. We need to do more. As you heard, the state's going to start focusing on it. Carla and I have already had discussions on it. The board, we're going to hear more about it. Number 3, share best practices. You know, I was thinking about this, and we originally said the board and the CEO, but you know, this is all of us. We all need to be sharing our best practices. Each and every one of us, each of our institutions has something we're doing well. You know, we should all be sharing with our colleagues and with everyone else with our good ideas. But we do need to create a way that maybe we could share it better, more officially. Number 4, publicize and be transparent. Once again, the CEO and the board will take leadership on that. 5, incorporate effectively in 3C2A rules, regulations, and eligibility requirements. That is obviously ultimately the CEO and the board, but I think once again that's all of us as well, and all of our committees and all of our groups that work on it. Under quick fixes for student success, there are none. And the reason is because these are all big issues, really big issues to tackle. So it's nothing that we could do real quickly. But that is something with all the priorities we're working on, we will get there. Well, Yogi Berra said, if you don't know where you are going, you might wind up someplace else. We've all heard this before. In fact, I think every strategic planning session opens up with Yogi Berra's quote on this. In fact, I'm opening it up because I'm going to talk about our board goals that are coming up for the 2013-2015 year. What's interesting is that after we did the retreat, you go back and look at our board goals, and most of them, if not all of them, apply directly to a lot of the issues at the retreat. So it's good to know that our board at least was out there in the front thinking about some of these issues. Certainly didn't cover them all, but did a lot of them. So I just wanted to remind everybody what we're going to be working on our board goals and who's responsible. The first board goal is we just need to complete evaluation of the executive director. It hasn't been done very well in the past. More importantly, what we've already instituted, and thank you, Carlisle, and all of us, is that the CEO and the 3C2A offices, what their goals and objectives are tied directly to the board, tied to our association. And that's the way it should be anyway. So that's a good one. Goal number two is we need to increase our partnerships and greater collaboration with other organizations out there, all of them, in fact. In particular, the State Chancellor's Office, obviously our CCLC, academic senates, all of the groups in our state and outside the state. Once again, this is a lot on our CEO, as well as we have an ad hoc committee going to be chaired by Gil Stort for that. Number three, by fall 2014, which is coming up, we need to analyze impacts of current cost containment policies and pending expiration date, which they will end supposedly on spring 2016. Of course, our cost containment committee will be the one that should be coming forward and working on that. Goal number four, develop a plan for supporting implementation of the Student Success Act recommendations for athletes at the state and local levels, including development of a statewide academic performance reporting mechanism. Well, you saw under the retreat goals, under accountability, that was one of them right there. We need to have data metrics, we need to do a researcher, we need to do all that. So we need to wait for some of those efforts in the retreat, but they tie directly to our board goal. Once again, this is the board and the CEO that will be working on that. Number five, develop a marketing plan for promoting community college athletics at the state and national levels. I want to tie that to number six, and number six is the next one, investigate opportunities for raising external resources for 3C2A and community college athletics. This is actually, I'll be honest, one of my big issues. It's been frustrating to me that every time I go to a game, and it frustrates me to no end, maybe because I'm a Trojan and we play the University of Oregon, but every time we go to a game, I see everybody wearing Nike and Adidas and Puma and New Balance, I don't know, every athletic thing's all for free. We're paying for it. It drives me batty. You know what? We got to find a way to tap into that, folks. This is free advertising that we're giving out there to these manufacturers. They pay the colleges, certainly the University of Oregon, like what Nike does, but they're out there. Why are they not doing it for our community college athletics? Well, the way that I believe they can do it is I mentioned earlier that we probably have the largest number of people, numbers involved statewide than just about anything going on. We probably, maybe potentially, we eclipse any single university certainly out there. I don't know about the whole systems in the state, but we certainly, each individual institution, we have far more people that are involved, far more exposure from a marketing and advertising perspective, and a bigger consumer. So we need to see how we can tap into it. I've been working on it with some national organizations. We need to do more. It just takes time like anything. But if any of you have ideas, we need to go forward and really find a way how we can start bringing more resources in so we can start doing all these things we mentioned about. It'd be great to have a way that we have a statewide sponsorship, which I think is a great idea from the business model, and I'm talking about with some companies on it to do that. So that's what 5 and 6 are about. Number 7, and the last goal is develop and implement orientation on the role of CEOs, CSSOs, CIOs, deans, athletic directors in the administration of community college athletics. Once again, this was also pointed out as a top issue on training for our retreat. This is an issue that I mentioned about doing a board committee on training and development that I'm going to talk about on Thursday and Friday. But this is something that's very important and already was one of our goals. So those are the board goals for 2013-15. And those are the issues that came up as the retreat in a very summary fashion. Well, Roger Staubach, you might remember him. He's a well-known NFL and Super Bowl quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys. He said, "Nothing good comes in life or athletics unless a lot of hard work has preceded the effort. Only temporary success is achieved by taking shortcuts." Magic Johnson, we're California, this is LA, famous LA Laker, all-star. "Ask not what your teammates can do for you, ask what you can do for your teammates." Well, one of the things I wanted to go over a little bit, and I've heard some questions, is let's go over what the role of the board of directors is, once again from a higher level perspective. Well, first off, I went and once again looked at our Constitution about the role of the board of directors, back to basics, right? Well, the purpose of the role of the board of directors is the 3CA board serves as the ultimate authority and provides operational oversight of the 3C2A. The 3C2A board is the policymaking body of the organization, and as such approves all changes to the Constitution and bylaws. The 3C2A board defines the direction of the 3C2A, supervises the 3C2A CEO, president, and executive director, and manages the 3C2A finances. I went and looked under the responsibilities. I had a lot of the typical responsibilities for a board, but there were two that stuck out at me. And the first was the board works with and seeks the input of the 3C2A Management Council, conferences, and affiliate organizations. The board provides a vehicle for due process for colleges and conferences when violations of the Constitution and bylaws by any constituency are reported. I don't know if I have to read them again, but I want people to really understand these are really the role of the board. And one of the things that we hear sometimes, and you hear it, once again, we're in academia, we hear things all the time. But when I hear comments that the board is going to overturn us, the board is going to put the iron fist down, first of all, that's not the way the board that I know, I've been on, 4 years now, I think, has ever operated, and it certainly doesn't operate now. I think my colleagues are all shaking their heads like, here, we don't operate that way, folks. We're here to implement and provide the overall guidance and support for what you all have come up with. We don't magically come up with these issues. It's coming up from the field. So understand that our purpose here is to support, work with you directly together to achieve the mission of what we're all trying to do. And once again, we're just, when it comes to decisions on appeals, like decisions on penalties, decisions on whatever, infraction violations, those are things that we're doing because you've told us to do it. We're just following what the field has come up with. Vince Lombardi, again, who we mentioned earlier, said, "The achievements of an organization are the result of the combined effort of each individual." He also said, "People who work together will win, whether it be against complex football defenses or the problems of modern society." The 3C2A is your membership organization, folks. You are all members. You are equal in this membership. So the question is, are you in the game, or are you merely just a bystander? Wayne Gretzky said, and we all know him, he's the great one, he said, "You miss 100% of the shots you never take." Billie Jean King, legendary tennis star, said, "Champions keep playing until they get it right." The California Community College Athletics will lead the nation on academic and athletics success. Let's make that our vision. Tommy Lasorda, another famous local athletic figure, said, "The difference between the impossible and the possible lie in a man's woman's determination." I think the board believes, and I think we all agree that 3C2A's bright future is there, and it really is up to each and every one of us to want to grasp it and to go forward and to make us be the leading athletic association, athletic program for students in the country. So that was my official comments. And with that, thank you, Pam. Do you have time for questions?
Yeah, we do.
So we have a few minutes for some questions, if anybody would like to ask me, or anybody else for that matter. Anything I said? Yes? I can hear you, but if you, maybe everyone else can't.
I love what you're talking about. I'm Evans Roderick. I'm the president of 3C4A, the Academic Council Association at San Antonio College.
Great.
I love the direction. I love what you're saying. Academics and athletic excellence. I've been in this business now almost 42 years. I don't see the academic component. The 3C4A, we have 19 full-time academic counselors in the state that work exclusively with student athletes. 19. counseling program, all about the academics. We have with us Kim Durant, she's the president of the INFORIC, the National Association of Academic Counselors for Student Athletes.
Oh, wonderful.
UCLA, and now the director at the University of Washington. The National Association is mainly made up of Division I institutions. California has been probably the only state, it is the only state that's organized as far as academic initiative and so on. And I think that the retreat you had, was anybody there about academics, counselors, that we were talking about that issue. This association, the CCAA, the 3C4A has asked for years to do collaborative efforts with the ADs, any other group. And we come to the association and we meet with ourselves. We have the NCA coming to our association, and we haven't had that dialogue with presidents, with board, with ADs. We do it over coffee or neighboring institutions. But I like the direction you're going, but I would like to see the push for full-time academic counselors and programs developed like EOPS programs.
Right. Well, I'll tell you, that's an issue for all of our colleges about counseling, as you know, not even just for athletics. You'll have people claiming that for all populations and for all students. We certainly don't have enough counselors. That's part of the Student Success Task Force recommendations, as you know, et cetera. What's good about, and hopefully you saw, was that was front and center. First of all, student success is one of our top 4. And the other 3, frankly, support that. More importantly, that's the first issue on the priority of students. The student success theme was developing a student success model. That was the first issue. And that's what we all should come up with. What is the actual ideal model at a community college to have a successful, effective athletics program to help students succeed? What is that? I also serve on my other hat as I'm very strong I serve on the network of California Community College Foundations. I'm the CEO rep for the state. I'm a very big believer in community colleges doing external resource development for a lot of the reasons I mentioned even earlier, and then some. But under that, they actually have created a model. The foundations know if you hire this type of personnel to do this, your outcomes are going to be this. We need to do the same thing for us. If an institution hires this, and has this in place, the outcomes are going to be what? The good news is we already know it's successful. Just like foundations, they already know it's going to be successful if you do it. It's the same thing here. Once we come up with that model, we need to communicate it better, have the facts and data to prove it, send it out there to our institutions, and once again, advocate for that to get that happens. Because it is very hard to do at a college-by-college basis. I was very hopeful and happy that I mentioned the men of color, for instance, about including us in our metrics and studying our populations, particularly on a statewide basis, will help us all locally as well. So I couldn't agree with you more that this is something that we need to do to go forward, and we can do it, and that will be the outcome. The ultimate outcome is, wouldn't it be great that every single one of our colleges, that you have CEOs like the ones that are here today, that are involved and engaged, that you have the support financially as well as institutionally and community for our programs, because they all understand how important it is for succeeding and the populations that we're dealing with. So I agree, absolutely. Yes, hello again. I love that idea, and we talked about training and development, and we talked about the various elements within our association. We left off counselors. I agree. I think that's a great idea. I hope somebody took notes on that one. Any other questions, comments? No? All right, I guess I covered everything then. Well, I wish everybody a great convention. I know it's already started, but it's really kicking off now. Have a great 3 days. I hope you're all going to stay for the board meeting on Friday, right?
If we could just provide one more round of applause for our board chair for his keynote address. And just a note, administrative note, we will be convening the opening business session and getting affiliate org reports. It's due to start at 9:45 in this same room. Okay, thank you all.